This is Ask Todd on the Financial Exchange Radio Network. If you have an existing estate plan or are in the market for one, Todd Lutsky is here to answer your questions and help you plan for later life. Ask Todd is presented by Cushing Dolan, serving Massachusetts and New England for more than 35 years, helping families with estate and tax planning, Medicaid planning, and probate law. Visit CushingDolan.com. Now, here's Todd Lutsky.
We are now joined by Todd Lutsky from the law firm of Cushing Dolan. The segment is Ask Todd, and this is your chance to ask Todd your questions about your estate plan. Phone number here in the studio is 888-205-2263. So get all queued up so that you have a chance to ask Todd your question during the segment. That number again is 888-205-2263. So if you've got a question about your estate plan, maybe you don't have one and you're trying to get it formulated. Maybe you've got, just an estate situation that you're sorting through right now with a friend or family member. That phone number again is 888-205-2263. Mr. Lutsky, how are you today?
I am never better, and you?
Doing okay.
Just okay?
Had to tell the daughter not to play with electricity yesterday.
Yeah, it's not safe.
Yeah, well, now she's grounded.
Of course she is.
So we're getting there. Todd, I want to talk to you a little bit more about gifting. Last week we were talking about some of the problems that people, some of the mistakes people make in gifting assets.
Yes.
I want to turn this around a little bit and be a little more uplifting today.
Okay.
How would someone build a successful gifting strategy into their estate plan? What does that look like to you when employing gifting as part of an estate plan?
I think it's a great question because the estate plan does two things, right? One, it designs assets in terms of how you leave the assets to your beneficiaries. And this is one that when you die, but you're saying we can also structure how we leave them to our children while we're living. We can start putting assets into a gifting trust. Now, this is very different than the irrevocable trust you hear us talk about a lot when we talk about Medicaid planning, right? There's many kinds of irrevocable trusts. This kind is more of a gifting trust. In other words, when people want to give assets to their children while they're living, which you can, of course, you feel a lot better. You get to see it. You get to enjoy it, whereas you don't when you pass away. And when you do that, though, you oftentimes don't want to just give it to them. You don't want to put it in their hands, right? Because that might not be in their best interest. One, it exposes it to their own creditors. I don't know if they're married. They might get divorced. You don't want to expose it to the divorce. The bottom line is if they own it outright, it's also going to be included in their estate for estate tax purposes. So maybe there's a way to not have them enjoy it, but not have it taxed in their estate when they pass. So you set up these gifting trusts, and that way you can kind of control it. Now, you can put the asset in, but you can't be the trustee. Because if you give it away and you retain the right to control the beneficial enjoyment of that asset by being trustee, well, then you haven't really given it away. And it's going to be included in your estate. And remember, part of the reason you're giving it away is because you want to reduce your own estate tax and your own estate tax liability. So you want to make sure it's not pulled back in. But you can put a kid on as trustee, even though they don't own it, and then you can retain the power to remove and replace that child as trustee. So you're kind of still controlling the strings here a little bit, and that's important.
Talking with Todd Lutsky from the law firm of Cushing Dolan. This segment is called Ask Todd because you get to ask Todd your questions about your estate plan. Phone number here is 888-205-2263. So call that number and you get to ask Todd live on air about your estate planning questions. And it's just a fantastic opportunity to get a little bit of knowledge about your specific situation. That phone number again is 888-205-2263. One more time, 888-205-2263. Todd, when you talk about gifting larger assets, I know we talked a little bit about, if you have an investment account or if you have a property or something like that and some of the issues there. Can we go into a little bit more depth on property? Because I think we had to move pretty quickly last week. In terms of the problems with, gifting a property to a child.
Sure.
just two or three of the biggest things that are problems there?
Yeah, I think quickly, just you could bullet these, right? If you give it away, one, you don't control it, you don't own it anymore. So you got to be ready for that. That's a big change, especially if it's a rental property or you're collecting income from it and you lose all that. So that's a big issue. Two, once it's in their hands, it's subject to their creditors. So then you may not want that. You may not want it subject to their creditors, their divorces. You may not want it included in their estate. So that's a big deal, right? And be careful, especially if you give away rental property. You think you've done a great job, even if you don't need it anymore, you don't need the rent, and you don't mind them owning it. You've given them a huge tax liability. You've given them all the built-in gain associated with that property when there might have been a better way to do it by dying owning it and maybe giving away other assets and preserving a step up in basis so that you can eliminate that gain. So lots to think about. And those are just, like you say, maybe the top three on the bullet list.
Talking with Todd Lutsky from the law firm of Cushing Dolan. If you've got a question you'd like to ask Todd about your estate plan, the number here is 888-205-2263. That number again is 888-205-2263. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, it's right to your questions with Todd Lutsky. That phone number again is 888-205-2263.
Ask Todd with Todd Lutsky every Wednesday at 10:30, only here on the Financial Exchange Radio Network.
All right, let's get right to our callers with Todd Lutsky. First up, we've got Kevin in Dennis. Kevin, what's your question for Todd?
Yeah, hi, I appreciate it. So, the wife and I just have one daughter. 7 years ago, did the will, the power of attorney, the health care, and then I wasn't going to do a trust, but he said we should. So we did a revocable trust just for a couple $100 with the daughter's name on it. Now, I want to put the house into that trust. So is that a huge process? Do I have to eliminate the trust that I have now, or can I just add the house with her, on that?
What did you mean that you put $100? You put $100 into the trust?
Yeah, he said you should do it now. So he did it with our name, and I don't even study it. I guess where the settle is, and it says, a couple $100 in the trust to start it.
Okay.
And then her.
Yeah, so both of you, both of you are the donors of the trust. That would be normal. Both of you are trustees. How old are you guys?
Well, I just turned 60, and the wife's 52.
60 and 52, and you have one child.
Yes.
So, as a rule of thumb, I don't know what all your other assets are. If that's your biggest asset and that's the only asset you want to put in the trust, you certainly can do it. It is not a big problem. You're simply allowed to just transfer the house. You have that same lawyer prepare a deed, transferring it from your name to your trust name. It's not a gift tax. There's no filing to do. It's just retitling the account so that the house so it avoids probate and gets to your child the way the trust says it will get to your child. So however you're leaving it is dictated in that document. The only other thing you might want to think about is, as you get older, if you are concerned about nursing homes, you might want to think about an irrevocable trust rather than a revocable trust. Although, of course, you always plan for the older spouse, even though there seems to be a big age difference between the two of you. So just something to think about, but absolutely you can transfer it. And the guy or the lawyer, whoever it was that prepared the trust for you, probably could prepare the deed and put it in there. So hopefully that helps a little. But you know what, folks? This is exactly the kind of thing that this guide is about. And so, Kevin, maybe this is for you as well. And for anybody who hasn't done their planning, this guide will help you understand how to leave your assets to your family. There are so many ways to do it through these trusts. Again, whether it's a special needs trust, whether it's to a grandchild, whether you want to skip a generation, whether you want to protect it from future divorces. So many things to think about when you leave an asset to a child. And trusts are usually a way to do it. This guide will show you how to do that. So again, if you haven't done your planning at all, this is a great way to get you off the dime, get you thinking about what you might put for language in your trust when you set it up. Now, if you've already done your planning, I think check it out, because you might want to amend your document and say, oh, wow, I didn't think of that. Or, oh, my child's married now and I'm not too keen on the spouse, or some other issue has happened and maybe there's a drug issue or something that's come up and you want to modify your document. You can do it. This will give you some ideas. Call and get the guide, folks. How to leave assets to beneficiaries, 866-848-5699. or legalexchangeshow.com. Again, 866-848-5699 or legalexchangeshow.com.
Todd, I've got another one for you here. Let's go to Joe in Boston. Joe, you are on with Todd Lutsky.
Hey, Ted, how are you? Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Good. So this one's more on behalf of my mother-in-law. So she owns a duplex in the city of Boston with her brother. They own it. Her health is kind of in decline between probably given a time limit less than 5 years. She, utilizes Mass Health, Medicare, stuff like that. There's a couple caveats where she's separated but not divorced, and there's a reverse mortgage on the home as well. And we're kind of saying, is that house or asset going to be protected when she does pass, given the fact that, you got Mass Health, Medicare coming after their piece, and just kind of a lot of moving parts between not being actually divorced and with the reverse mortgage, and just, is there a safe way for her to kind of pass that property on?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things here. You're saying a lot of information, right? And that's helpful for me to answer it. So the reverse mortgage is always going to be there. So and she only owns half. Remember, the other half is with the brother, so only half is at risk. In terms of at least avoiding probate, I would throw it into a revocable trust, and that way, it will avoid probate and get to who it goes to. However, the reverse mortgage is going to remain on there and will be called when she passes. Not sure if you mentioned something about 5 years. Does she have 5 years to get this protected from the cost of nursing home care? It doesn't sound like that was the problem, so maybe just getting it in a revocable trust. But arguably, if you threw it into an irrevocable trust now and there's been no lien placed on the property yet by Mass Health, might be too late later. So that might be something to think about in terms of putting it in there. But Community Mass Health does generally try to get paid back as well for things that they've received, for benefits that were received over time. So yeah, tough situation, but I would never not plan. So I would put that at least into a revocable trust and just you get it to avoid probate and get it to where you need it to go, and that way she can keep collecting the income and so forth. So tough situation, Joe, but yeah, I would do something.
Todd, I've got one more for you. We're going to see if we can get 3 calls done here. Let's go to Jeff in Florida. Jeff, what is your question for Todd Lutsky?
Hey, Todd. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Regarding the gift trust.
Yes.
When there's capital realized gains in a given year, we have one set up. My parents set it up. And at the end of the year, tax time, my dad will go ahead and pay the tax on the realized gains in that trust. Now, let's say there was $100,000 worth of gains. You have 4 trustees, 4 kids. Are the kids supposed to claim each one of them $25,000 as income, or is that completely separate?
So really, good question, and this is for a lot of people, right? When you're out there, you got to make sure you're going to have to go probably back to the lawyer that drafted it and find out whether or not it is a grantor trust for income tax purposes. I know that we draft them at Cushing and Dolan to be grantor trusts. In English, that means that your dad or your parents, as the grantors, are treated as the owner for income tax purposes, which means even if there is no distribution of income, interest, dividends, or gains, even if none of that is distributed out of the trust to your parents, and they may not even be entitled to it if it's a gifting trust, quite frankly. So even though it's not distributed out, it's picked up on their personal income tax return, and they pay it. None of the kids, they pay it. If it is not a grantor trust, and there's special language in there that you need to ask your attorney if they did it. If it's not a grantor trust and the distributions do not come out to the kids, then the trust pays the tax. But the trust would pay the tax at a much higher level because they're taxed at a higher rate. If it is distributed out, then the kids will pay the tax. So check with your creator on that one. Thanks so much.
Mr. Lutsky, thank you so much for joining us today.
Always a pleasure.
This has been Ask Todd on the Financial Exchange Radio Network. Ask Todd with Todd Lutsky has been presented by Cushing and Dolan, serving Massachusetts and New England for more than 30 years, helping families with estate and tax planning, Medicaid planning, and probate law. Call 800-393-4001 or visit CushingDolan.com. The views expressed in this segment are solely those of Cushing & Dolan. Armstrong Advisory does not provide any legal or tax advice. Please consult with your legal or tax advisor on such matters. Cushing & Armstrong do not endorse each other and are not affiliated.